Welcome to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast with your hosts, Mike Randall and Gus Kearns.
Welcome in, listeners, to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast, where we're always talking everything college hoops. You could have been anywhere else on Dot, but you chose to be here with us, Mike and Gus, and we are just trying to fire through and give you as many incredible teams from this past season and the season upcoming, fingers crossed, in the sport of college hoops and provide a little bit of your sports fix. One of those teams that we need to talk about is a top 10 team from this past season, the Creighton Bluejays. We brought in Jon Nyatawa from the World-Herald. Please give his stuff a follow over at omaha.com. And please don't forget to give Jon a follow at capital Jon, capital Nyatawa, Jon Nyatawa, omaha.com, of course. Follow everything Creighton basketball. Jon was nice enough to give us a few minutes to talk some Blue Jays. A couple of things we got into, of course, we had to talk a little Ty-Shonalexander and the explosion this past season of the Blue Jay guard, putting him on the level with Big East guard greats such as Kamar Baldwin, Miles Powell, and even Marcus Howard. We talked about what advancements and what non-box score elements helped him elevate his game this past season. We talked some transfers. We talked transfers coming in. We talked transfers going out. Talked a little Alex O'Connell coming in from Duke. Talked a little Damion going out to Kentucky. Blue bloods all over the place. Maybe we need to start including Creighton in that conversation where they have big talent coming in, big talent going out. Just another stop. A couple other things we talked about. Marcus Zagorowski. We both think, Jon and I both think that he might be one of the best players in the country next year. Don't be surprised when that happens. Listen, Jon was nice enough to go into some X and O's as well for Creighton and talk about Coach McDermott and what he does on the sidelines, what attitude and what culture he tries to create among his roster and program. And we took a look at next year, of course. Things look promising. You're going to want to hang around for that at the end. And we talked a little zip line and what you might want to listen to on Spotify. If you really like what you're listening to, what you might like to listen to on Spotify as well. Please don't forget to give the podcast a follow over on Twitter at SDS Podcast. Efficiency of keystrokes, of course. Don't forget to give Mike a follow over at Randall Rant. He is insightful, educational, and entertaining in all one nice, tidy little package. And if you really like what you're listening to, go over to your podcast consumption vehicle of choice, whatever that might be. Say nice things. Leave a nice review for the podcast and leave nice things. Leave a nice review for our guests, just like Jon. Kindness is always cool, everybody. Hope everybody's staying calm, healthy, and safe out there. We're right with you. Hope that a little listen here and there to some college basketball helps you find that calm. Cheers, everybody. Let's get to that conversation. We're trying to pay attention and give you your sports fix, even though there's no sports existing currently. And hopefully we can look back on some of the great teams from this past season and look forward to what might be happening next season. And one of those teams that we need to pay attention to on both sides of the spectrum are the Creighton Bluejays. And we brought in Jon Nyatawa from the Omaha World-Herald. You can follow his information over at omaha.com. Jon, thank you so much for joining the podcast and joining talking some Blue Jays basketball.
Glad to be here. Always good to talk hoops, even if you haven't seen any basketball in way too long. I'm just I got a basketball in the house. I just look at it every day. I'm like, man, what I wouldn't give to go to the gym right now. I don't have a hoop on my driveway, so that was a major fail by me when I bought this house 2 years ago. No hoop, and now I'm paying for it.
It's funny you say that because my one daughter, she's a baller, and we've been dribbling in the basement like crazy, dribbling up and down the driveway like crazy. And a couple of nice days, we actually ventured out to the park just to get some shots up. And luckily, there was nobody else there. So we had some isolation, some jump shots in isolation. And we were thinking the exact same thing. Man, we need a hoop right here in the driveway right now, stat. So, Jon, it seems like with your program that there's lots of student athletes who are investing in moving boxes and vans. Let's talk about some of the moving parts that you have going on over there for Creighton Hoops. Let's just start at the top. Your program garnered a share of the Big East title, had a top 4-ish seed going in March, and had some, Final Four buzz. Appropriately so, heading into the season's premature finish line. This Blue Jay team was adored by many. Was this admiration properly placed? Or is this program ready to roll through March and make a push? What do you feel with this particular lineup and this particular roster that you had?
I mean, it was a fun team to cover. They were a blast to follow. And as a sports writer, you're just kind of you just want to tell good stories and be entertained, just like any other fan. I'm a fan of college basketball, so it's a blessing that I get to get paid to write about it and to follow a team like Creighton, which honestly kind of came out of nowhere. I think I picked them 4th in the Big East. The coaches picked them 7th. So we were all underrating this team going into the season. I can't remember. I know there's, those national analysts do the rankings of like 1 through 353, and Creighton was like in the 70s in a lot of them. So there wasn't a lot of buzz for this team. And even in January, I mean, I thought the Jays had a pretty good non-conference season, but in January they started 2-3 in the Big East, and they're kind of at a crossroads. You weren't quite sure, well, is this team going to take the next step and progress to where it can contend for a Big East title, or is it just going to be sort of like hovering around that average sort of label and try to sneak into the NCAA tournament? But they found a groove, and there are a lot of flaws that they had. They're limited with size. They didn't really have a true big man, with the exception of like a part-time senior graduate transfer who came in every now and then and played. So they struggled to rebound. They weren't deep, but they had such an electric and dynamic offense led by their guards, Marcus Zegarowski, Ty-Shon, Mitch Ballack. I had a couple versatile wings in Damion, Jefferson, and Denzel Mahoney, and a five-man who's not even a five-man. Like, he played point guard in high school, Christian Bishop.
Right.
So they just found a way to make it work. Like, they just used small ball against the traditional lineups of the Big East, and threes are better than twos, push pace, didn't turn the ball over. Caught up, like I said, I found rhythm and caught fire at the end of the year and ended up winning the Big East title. So yeah, the praise at the end of the season was legit. They finished 7th in the country in the AP rankings going into the NCAA tournament. Now, Marcus Zegarowski was hurt and he wouldn't have played in the tournament. So ceiling probably wasn't as high going into March as it would have been had he been healthy. So it's hard to say where they would have gone. They were legit, and when they had a stretch late February where they were just killing teams. It was ridiculous. A video game style highlights night after night. So they were a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, no doubt. Those, just the point totals alone, John. You were living in the 90s as far as score wise, and you nailed it with your perimeter talent that you have on that team. Let's start with your now former stud guard, Ty-Shon Alexander. He's off to the NBA draft. In a league that's just loaded with the best guards in the nation, whether it be Marcus Howard, Miles Powell, Kamar Baldwin, Alexander just might owning the most complete pro profile as far as the next level. What improvements during last offseason allowed Ty-Shon to flourish inside the star-studded Big East this past season?
I think it was a mentality thing for him. As a sophomore, he got he had to shoulder the responsibilities, or at least he felt that he had to shoulder the responsibilities as the go-to guy. And there are nights when shots weren't falling, teams were locking him down, and he just couldn't find that offensive rhythm, and that affected his game and his ability to lead. And so his goal going into this last season was to find ways to impact the game when he wasn't scoring, whether I was grabbing rebounds or locking up on defense or inspiring his teammates by just kind of being a motivator and saying the right things and keeping the right body language. Body language was big for him. And I think that commitment to some of the other parts of the games like allowed him to sort of take the next step and become more of an all-around complete player. And honestly, he became more efficient offensively too because of that.
Right.
He wasn't focusing or so committed, so consumed by whether or not the shot went in. He was able to kind of just keep attacking and try to stay consistent. So, yeah, he took a huge jump from his sophomore to junior year. And like you said, he was right there with those guys. Those guys got more, like Marcus Howard and Miles Powell got more recognition because they scored more. They had big time game shots, but Ty-Shon locked him up every time he played against those two guys. And even Sadiq Bey at Villanova, who's looking like a first-round draft pick, Ty-Shon matched up really well against him in the two games that he faced off against him. So, yeah, we'll see where Ty-Shon goes from a pro perspective. I think a lot of Creighton fans were disappointed that he decided to take that route because, you look at his draft profile, and he even said he got his report back from the undergraduate advisory committee. They don't know if he's going to get drafted, like a second round pick, maybe undrafted. And so I think Creighton fans were hoping that maybe he'd stick around for his senior year and kind of go out with a bang, but he's ready. I think in his mind, he wanted to turn pro and start that next chapter of his career. So, he made a big jump and got himself in a position where he can make this leap to go to the pros. So kudos to him. But I know me as a college basketball fan, a little disappointed. I was sitting there watching, they had all these old games
Right.
from the Final Four or NCAA tournament playing on CBS Sports Network. I'm watching some of those, and I'm thinking of some of these like legendary backcourts that made deep runs in the NCAA tournament, like Arizona's trio. What was that, like Bibby, Simon, Terry, or something like those three guys? That was great. Illinois group, D. Brown.
That's what I was going to say with D. Brown and Deron Williams. Yep.
Yeah, I was like, this Creighton had a great trio of guards. I was like, they could have their own story. And I was already sort of like kind of like brainstorming for next year. But obviously he decided to go pro. So good for him. And, Creighton, they're going to have to find a way to replace him.
Well, you mentioned the efficiency that he played with this season on both sides of the ball. He was a menace defensively. He turned himself into one of the, top perimeter defenders, and you have to be if you're going to play that position inside the Big East, especially this past season. But then you also talked about his shooting metrics. They just improved across the board. And when you can score at three levels like Ty-Shon can, he can definitely break you down off the dribble and has a little wiggle to his game. So he's got that part. He does have a decent mid-range game, and inside Creighton's offense, of course, you're going to bomb it from deep. So he was efficient from there too. So
and the one thing about Ty-Shon too that I want to add is like, if you don't watch him, like, incredible. I wish I charted it out. His 3-point shooting percentage in the first 5 seconds of the shot clock was unreal. This dude would sprint down, catch it in rhythm, and fire before the defense was set over and over again. And I'm sure it's on the scouting report. As a matter of fact, when he hit a few of those in front of the coach's bench, you saw the coaches react with so much agony and just like, what are we doing? Why are we leaving this dude open? But he hit it so fast, and that was a pretty valuable piece to Creighton's offensive attack, especially in transition. Jays like to push. That might be one of there's so many areas where he impacted the game, but that just his threat to score right as soon as the ball crosses half court was really notable. And he was, that was his favorite shot, man. Like the in rhythm, Marcus Zagorowski kick it ahead, like a half court length of the court pass. He fired up with 26, 25 seconds on the shot clock, in rhythm jumper, cash. So don't miss that.
When we were, just talking previously about like what question marks maybe NBA minds or eyes might have with Alexander, I mean, that might be one of the things that benefits him, because if we're looking at NBA offenses and we're going to look at Dame Lillard, I know we didn't get to see Steph this past season fully, but if you look at how those two players have impacted the game as far as their shot selection and where they take those shots from, it sounds like Alexander might fit into that kind of profile as an offensive attacker. But you lose Ty-Shon, but you get something back. You got Alex O'Connell from Duke. Top flight point guard comes in. Seems like O'Connell might be a perfect fit in Omaha for what Creighton likes to do on offense. And it's another Big East team getting something from Duke. And that reminded me of Jordan Tucker going to Butler.
Yeah.
Speaks to the transformation level of the type of student athlete that Creighton is starting to get now, and they can currently house after the move to the Big East, right? I mean, this makes sense on all fronts, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's going to sit out, I think, is the plan for him. So he won't be playing next year. But
right.
I look at his film from when he was in high school, because you get to see a lot of Duke. I mean, there's some highlights where he's dunking on some people and putting the ball on the floor. Obviously, he's known as a shooter. He shot 36% from three at Duke. But he's got a lot of athleticism to his game, playmaking ability, and they think that they can sort of mold that within this offense that Creighton runs, and he'll have a really good senior year. But he's got to sit out next year, and then he'll be eligible for 21-22. But like you said, it is a signal that to get a player with the name recognition and kind of the prestige of Alex O'Connell, because he's a Duke player, like he announces he's transferring. It's like on the main page of ESPN, and people in college basketball know this player. They know his name, and anybody who is intrigued or the idea of, hey, maybe we can add this guy, they're going to reach out. And so Creighton had to battle some big time programs to get him. Yeah, they found a way to lure him to Omaha. So it does say it's another sign that Creighton's kind of rising up. Its reputation is increasing in a positive way as a program. It's not a mid-major anymore. It's kind of crazy to say that, given that the Jays have only been in the Big East for 6 years. Like, the transformations happen fast, but it's had to happen fast, or else they get left behind. Because this league is one of the best in the country.
If you don't step up the roster talent, overall talent, then you're going to be You're going to be St. John's when they were down. You're going to be that, doormat for the Big East. And like everybody looks at you as like an automatic win. And that's the complete opposite. Like your coaching staff and roster turnover has been unbelievable and has definitely kept up with the rigors of the Big East. A couple of other guys on your roster. You mentioned them earlier, Damion, Jefferson, and Denzel Mahoney. They're on the NBA draft list as well. And this seems just like par for the course, even though it's kind of unknown right now in the current climate. Players are going to obtain as much information as they can and from as many minds as they can for playing, professional basketball. And this just seems similar to one of your former student athletes, Samson Frawling, who decided to leave and go play pro overseas. So is this, do you think that Jefferson and Mahoney are a threat to go do that, or do you think they're just obtaining information in this situation?
Samson Frawling was different in that he's an Australia kid, and he got an opportunity. I think that they're doing a startup semi-pro league, and he got a pretty good contract from what I heard. Right. And the idea was, hey, come join this semi-pro league, and then you can go up to the big league in Australia. So he, opportunity to go back home, he kind of turned down, and so a little different from these two, because I think Damion and Denzel are just testing the waters like so many guys do in college basketball. What is it like? 175 declared for the draft last year, and half of them returned to school within a month after declaring. So I think that those two fit into that boat. And, anything can happen, and the allure of making money right away could perhaps draw them out of school. But my assumption is that they're just there to, like you say, gain some feedback, gain some evaluation from different sources, different avenues than you would normally get access to. And also maybe just kind of get a nice taste of what the professional realm is like, having conversations with agents, getting the picture of what teams are looking for and how they operate. Like if you're just at home doing workouts, watching your strength coach do workouts and you're mimicking his movements, or you're going out into your driveway doing dribbling drills, like you're not having those conversations. And so perhaps those two guys who are going to be seniors next year and are going to, at this time next year, enter the professional realm of college or the professional realm of basketball. Perhaps this little sort of taste, this pre-interview, almost like a job fair in a way, allows them to kind of get prepared for it.
That's a great comparison with the job fair, and I feel like it's very similar to the three student athletes from Richmond declaring for the NBA draft. They're not on draft boards anywhere, like you mentioned earlier. But I think just getting their name out and using it as an information gathering opportunity for them to see what they're going to do during their senior years and say, hey, is playing professionally like an option for me? Let me get as much information as I can get now, so I'll be a little bit more prepared for my senior season. I think your two guys might fall into that category as well. All right, John, let's talk Damion Mintz. We're transferring. We got you're bringing in a Duke transfer, and one of your guys is going over to another blue blood in Kentucky. He's going to follow in the footsteps of the other grad transfers that they brought in there, Nate Sestina and Reed Travis. So I guess just let Big Blue Nation know what they're getting with the 6'3" guard that can kind of do a little bit of everything that we didn't get to see this past season. Yeah,
he sat out with an injury. He hurt his ankle. It was like a high ankle sprain that he initially didn't think was that big of a deal, and maybe rushed to get back. Then got a setback, and then looked like he was coming back in December, and then had another setback. And then at that point, he was like, look, I want to play my senior year, my last year at college ball, fully healthy. And he's one of those guys that sure has pro dreams, but you also kind of got to be a little bit realistic. Like, is he going to be at the top of the draft boards? No. And so he, in his mind, was like, I need to prove myself as a senior, and I don't know if I can do that if I'm at 75%. So he decided to redshirt and got the blessing of the coaching staff and his teammates to do that. And what's interesting about him is I thought he had taken a jump as a traditional point guard during the offseason. He wasn't. I felt like in high school he was more of a kind of like a score first guard, kind of like a combo guard that we see college in basketball so often. Wasn't necessarily a true point guard that had those skills, but he was learning that at Creighton and developing that piece of his game. Just started seeing the floor better, making passes better, anticipating a little bit more, like throwing guys open. Like you hear that phrase a lot in basketball, and he was doing that, it seemed like. But then he got hurt, and we never got to see it. So that's what I'm intrigued to see, if he can carry some of that, what I thought was improvement and progression in his game development to Kentucky and be that guy for them, because it sounds like that's what they're going to need. At Creighton, he would not have played point guard. Maybe a little bit, but he was going to be most likely primarily a two guard guy, especially after Ty-Shon Alexander left. because Creighton's got a guy, Marcus Zegarowski, who might just be, I don't know, top 5 point guard in the country next year. Maybe you can make an argument top 3. He's going to be really good. So Damion, I think, recognized, like, look, I want to make a name for myself, and I want to play point guard, and it's hard for him to do that at Creighton. So he went to Kentucky. So it is a loss for Creighton from a depth perspective, because, like I said, while he wanted to play point guard, he could have taken some minutes off Marcus Zegarowski's shoulder for stretches. Like, he wouldn't have started, but taken some minutes off him. And then he's a good shooter and an athletic guy, and get downhill, get to the free throw line. Like, he would have been a nice piece for the Jays at the 2-guard spot. He decided to go. And so, like I said, I'm intrigued to see if he can find that right balance of being the scorer that he has the capability to be, but also the distributor and kind of the leader, floor general at Kentucky. So we'll see.
Yeah, we've seen the success that Coach Cal has had with lead guards and point guards in general there at Kentucky. So if you're going to go someplace to finely tune those skills that you said that he was developing and really growing with, then that might be the best place to go do it, especially under Coach Cal. I mean, we've seen this. And
have a lot of talent around you too, like.
Doesn't hurt.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Marcus Zegarowski. Let's go there. I mean, he averaged 16 points a game, over 5 assists a game, over a steal. He was 42% from 3. He led the entire Big East in effective field goal percentage at almost 59%. I think your assessment of labeling him as one of the top lead guards in the nation is totally appropriate. I mean, I think we can plug him into a first-team All-Big East position, and maybe even talk about like a second, third-team type All-America type season if all goes according to plan. I mean, he was just so fun to watch last season, and we're not off base to expect big things from Zeg next season, right?
No doubt. I'd say he's the favorite for the preseason Big East Player of the Year. Honestly, okay,
there we go.
Like if Sadiq Bey comes back to school for Villanova, then maybe he gets that nod. But to me, especially the way Marcus Zegarowski was playing at the end of the year, like, his numbers are ridiculous. His last 8 games of the season, he's averaging 18 points a game, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, a steal, shot 60% from the floor. You mentioned his effective field goal percentage. A lot of that's because he shot so well from 3. In his final 8 games, he shot 60% from 3. He had a game where he went 7 of 7 from 3, 5 of 5 from 3. And a lot of his shots, when you look at it, like, sure, he gets a few set catch and shoot shots, but most of them he's coming up off a ball screen, off the dribble. They're not necessarily your in rhythm sort of like true jump shots. He's a little bit off balance, has to score up a little bit. So like it's a testament to his shooting ability and how good of a scorer he is. And I thought he took a step with his creativity inside the arc last year too, finding guys, creating opportunities for scorers. And then scoring himself, like from that 8 to 10 to 12 range, he was really clever and creative in his ability to get buckets. The interesting thing about his game next year, which I'm so intrigued by it, because Creighton last year, it was just different. They played with 4 guards, 5 guards at times. A big piece of their offense is normally this ball screen action where they set the big, it's what you see in college basketball. Big comes up, sets the screen, dives to the rim. The defense has to adjust to that. A lot of times this last year, teams were kind of trying their best to take away Marcus Zegarowski's his playmaking ability off that ball screen. But the Jays are going to add some size. They're going to get a couple 7-footers that they're going to put into the mix who can go up and get it at the top of the square on those lobs off ball screens. And so I think that might open up some opportunities for Marcus Zegarowski, not just to pad the assist total, but also create off that once teams are trying to, oh no, we don't want to give up the lob. Now we have to bring a tag guy down, and that, it fractures the defense. So yeah, he's going to get better. Yeah, he's rehabbing that injury. Like I mentioned earlier, he got hurt on the last regular season game of the year, a knee meniscus tear, but he'll be good to go in the summer. And I think he's in store for a monster junior year.
Couldn't agree with you more. And if he's going to have more weapons at his disposal off of those ball screens, so you can't just hedge off of him and guard his space that he likes to operate in. Holy smokes. That sounds like a nightmare for opposing coaches inside the Big East and anybody that's on the schedule for next year trying to guard him. He's going to be a handful. And you're right. You know what? I just wanted to, echo your statement on his creativity and his craft inside the lane. That's definitely something that you saw improvement with this season. He's not just like this knockdown shooter. He's very crafty and has some creativity and some artistry inside the lane, whether it be creating his own shot or creating for others. So and if we're going to add like a 7-footer that can catch a lob or that can, create a little bit more space for him to, do his thing on the perimeter. Holy smokes. Yikes. One of those guys that might benefit from that is Mitch Ballock. He's just one of those guys. He's 6'5". He's big. He can shoot it from 3, 43%. He's big enough to defend multiple positions. I know that he was one of those guys that, when you went 4 out or 5 out, he was one of those guys that had the bigger defensive assignment. He's got a high hoop IQ, wonderful assist to turnover ratio, and he lit up Marquette for 24 points in that win. I think that he might be, one of those guys that we look up next season and might garner a triple-double or two. He's just a winning type player. What do you think makes Ballock so special in the huddle, on the practice floor, and even in the classroom?
Yeah, I mean, he's selfless. He's got that personality where he just wants to win and doesn't care how it happens. This will be legendary for his career. Like, they went and beat Seton Hall at Seton Hall this year. It was, I can't remember where Seton Hall was ranked, but it was a must-win game for Creighton to stay in the Big East race, and obviously ended up sharing the title with Seton Hall. So you look at that game as important. It was a statement type game. Mitch Ballock didn't score. He had 0 points in that game, and it wasn't like he was hunting shots. I don't know what he ended up like 0 for 4 or something from the floor. Seton Hall did a good job of blanketing him, taking away some of the stuff he likes to do, some of his scoring, his preferred scoring windows, and he was cool with it. Didn't hear a word from his teammates. He was celebrating with his teammates afterward, like as if he would have scored 30 and led him to the win, hit the game winner. So I think that's his personality. I think it's infectious. This team last year, a lot of their success those players talked about was because of their ability to be to sacrifice for one another, to find the right role for this team and to walk sort of in unison in pursuit of a goal. And I thought Mitch Ballock is kind of the leader in that. But yeah, he's a knockdown shooter who I would imagine is eager to show off more of his game this next year. I'm guessing he's in the gym right now, who working on some of the different ways that he can find a way to score and counter, teams, commitment and determination to run him off the 3-point line. So we'll see what kind of senior year he has. I'm sure it's going to be great.
Yeah, I was going to say, that he's going to have a whole bunch of defenders rushing at him out of that 3-point line to try to defend him coming off a screen or in the space that somebody like Zagorowski might create for him. But yeah, I love the word selfless we use it with him.
Oh yeah, for sure. They were really creative with this. They called it the hit and chase action they had, and Mitch, I felt like, was really good at it. Because teams basically they essentially were like face guarding him. I mean, like they were on top of him. He couldn't have he's standing in the corner on the wing, and they got a defender glued to him, like basically standing on his toes. And so they kind of came up with this idea where they do a handoff. It's not a dribble handoff. It's just a straight handoff. And that defender would be chasing Mitch, and he could kind of just read the defender and grab the handoff or fake handoff and then come right back and get it. And then the big could turn and screen that defender. And it would put a lot of pressure on the opposing big to step out and help. Otherwise, open three for Mitch Ballock. And I just thought he was really creative in that. And I'm eager to see how he, what new wrinkles can he come up with off that action. And obviously there's other pieces of his game too offensively, but that stood out. I thought that was clever by Creighton's coaching staff. It's, you've seen it in college basketball before for sure, but they had this a lot of success with it. And Mitch was one of the guys who really thrived with it, just reading the defense and getting that big man to hand the ball off at the right time and then re-screen on the defender who was chasing, and Mitch would pull up for a three. So Creighton they did a lot of good, like they'd have these certain actions that just worked, and it's hard to defend, and they just kind of rolled with them. They're like, all right, this works, so we're going to do this over and over again until you figure it out.
They let the opposing coaches and the opposing rosters like make decisions in real time. And then if they keep making the wrong decision, like why would you go away from that set over and over, especially when you can stretch the floor. And like we mentioned previously in the conversation, like they know a good 3 is better than a poor 2. So if you're going to leave the good 3 open, we're going to take it every single time. And we talked about all the percentages, and they're all in the 40s here. So if you're going to not guard a 40% 3-point shooter, good luck guarding that. That sounds impossible. Let's jump down. You mentioned Coach. Let's jump down to Coach Greg McDermott. He's the architect behind like the video game numbers that we mentioned earlier that, Creighton puts up on offense. I guess the question is, what coaching traits allow him and allow Creighton to be so successful inside the Big East, nationally, and owning a number 3 offensive efficiency number via KenPom? You guys were unbelievable on offense this year. He was a bit ahead of the curve inside college basketball to copycat what's happening in the NBA game with the number of threes, the type of players he recruits, and the efficiency and the frequency of which they're going to shoot that shot. And sometimes that gets lost because the Big East can be a grind, but if you can have that type of offensive profile, it makes a difference, right?
Yeah, no doubt. And you're right. It can be, it's why you can't be too offensive oriented in the Big East because teams are going to, this season's just long, and by February, the legs start getting a little bit more tired and teams start figuring out some of your pet plays and your go-to calls. It's funny. This is one thing I didn't realize that when I first started covering basketball, but like I sit courtside and every time a play call is made, you see the opposing bench like reacting to it, like yelling out their responding defensive call. Like everyone knows everyone's place. You can't, It's hard to be clever in a way that I'm gonna get them with this one. Every now and then you do, but they're so well scouted. They know each other, and especially Greg McDermott's been in the league since the reconstruction. So what he did this year, though, it was really commendable. And obviously he won the Big East Coach of the Year award for good reason. Him and his staff found a way to make it work, man, because like I said, they lost. Damion Mintz got hurt, like we talked about. The guy we haven't brought up is Jacob Epperson, who is a top 100 recruit who got hurt at the start of the season. He was going to be one of their big men, and they lose him. They had some injuries early on in the year too, so they were playing walk-ons, just trying to find a way. It seemed like every game it was like, someone getting foul trouble, and you just, how do we fix this on the fly and figure it out? And Creighton's coaching staff did a good job. Like they weren't a great defensive team, but to be at the level where they could, if they needed to stop, they could get it. And they didn't have a rim protector. And yet, obviously you mentioned Ty-Shonalexander's ability defensively. He bought into some of the things they were asking him to do and showed off his athleticism. But as a whole, like I thought they did a great job scouting teams, and they gambled a little bit, said, look, if we got a 30% or 25% 3-point shooter who wants to take those shots, we're going to let him take it. And sometimes they got burned, but more times than not, they were the beneficiaries of some, I guess, playing the numbers from a scouting perspective. But yeah, Greg is like, from what I hear from his staff, like he's one of those guys who he'll be watching an NBA game, see a set play, and be like, I'm gonna text my video guy, Warriors, Magic, 12-minute mark or 10-minute mark of the second quarter. I want that out of bounds play or something, So he's got a ton of out of bounds plays that he works in. And I think on offense, though, one of the reasons why they are as successful as they are is he just instills his guys with confidence. You'll see a Mitch Bally go 0 for 4, not score against Seton Hall, and the coach is right there with him the next day telling him how good he is and keep shooting, and I'm never going to tell you not to shoot type thing. So you'll hear that from his players a lot about how much confidence he puts or instills in them. And there's just a freedom with which they play because they like to push tempo and score, or at least take a shot if it's a good look within the first 10 seconds of the shot clock. I think that just inspires his players to kind of showcase what they got. Yeah, he's found a great way to blend the technical aspects of it, his offensive X's and O's, draw something up, with the freedom of playing ball and just saying, all right, let these guys go to work. We'll run a ball screen at the top of the key, and then you guys just read it and figure it out. So it's kind of remarkable. Sometimes you watch them play for a stretch, and you're like, are they running anything? It just looks like they're just balling. And there is structure, obviously, but sometimes he's just letting them go and play free. Yeah, he's certainly evolved as a coach over time, but he's elevated himself to obviously he's one of the best coaches in the Big East, which is one of the best conferences in the country. So, he's obviously put the program in a good place to to take the next step.
And when you mention like his name, Big East Coach of the Year, then you're automatically included in the conversation of, finest coaches in the country. So I don't think that's off base at all, especially, with you have national championship coaches like Coach Wright, and you have coaches that have been there forever, like Coach Willard at Seton Hall. So, and up and coming coaches like, Coach Jordan over at Butler. So there's the variety, but I think you're correct on your assessment of saying like Coach McDermott has evolved to a different league, a different style, and has found success in that evolution. It's pretty remarkable. So let's play fortune teller a little bit. Let's look into the crystal ball for the listeners out there for next season. Even with all the promise that this season held and some Final Four chatter and a top 10 ranking at season's end, and a possible Big East tournament title that was within reach, minus injury, of course. Why should Creighton fans hold hope for next season? Are we talking again about a top 20-ish team? Are we talking about a top 10-ish team, or maybe someplace in the middle? What are the expectations for next season? And is Creighton going to be a factor nationally again like they were this season?
Man, I've been asked a lot about this because Creighton, we mentioned Damion Mintz. They lost him. They lost Ty-Shon Alexander. I think some fans have been a little bit disappointed, because the way you got to understand, like the way that this team was kind of built up, it was like 2020, 2021 was the year. Like what happened this past season with Marcus Zagorowski and Mitch Ballack and Ty-Shon Alexander sort of raising the bar, it happened faster than a lot of fans expected. And so in their mind, it was always about next year. Like that was the year that they had targeted 2 years ago when Creighton was losing close games and just missed out on the NCAA tournament berth, wound up in the NIT. So this past season, to do what they did to make the progression faster than a lot of people expected, I think I don't know if the fans have caught up to that yet, because they're a little disappointed to lose some guys when they thought, hey, well, this is supposed to be about next year. But I've tried to tell people, look, they're going to be good. I mean, they finished in the top 10 in the country, and they're bringing back potentially 4 starters. They're bringing back potentially 6 of their top 8 rotation players, plus adding in Jacob Epperson, former top 100 recruit, adding in another top 100 recruit in Brian Kalkbrenner, 7-footer from St. Louis, adding in Antoine Jones, who's a versatile 6'6" guard, played at Memphis and decided to transfer. He had to sit out last year, but he's a nice piece that can play the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5. Like he can move all over. So they have talent they're bringing back. They're adding talent. To me, it looks like a top 10 team once again. I don't know how many teams. I'm thinking like Baylor, maybe, Michigan State, Villanova for sure. Like how many teams across the country are going to bring back as much from last year? And in college basketball, experience is so valuable, especially experience with talent. I mean, it's not like Marcus Zagorowski, Mitch Ballack, Christian Bishop, those guys can't play. They definitely are really good. They proved it this year. So I think Creighton's in store for another good year. You look at the way they're scheduling, it's incredibly aggressive. They're going to play in the Battle for Atlantis. They got a road game at Kansas. They got Arizona State coming into Omaha, and I think they're in line for a Gavitt Games home game as well. So, like, plus the 20-game Big East schedule with UConn in the mix now too. Like they're going all in, and I think that's always. I always look at that as a sign from coaching staff, especially those who haven't maybe traditionally scheduled aggressively in the past. Like if they're going after it, like that means they feel good about the team, and so I think Creighton fans should too. Plus, like I know we've given Marcus Zagorowski a lot of love, but like when you have one of the best players in college basketball, especially a guy who's going to be running the show, you always got a chance to be really good. And so it'll be a matter of Creighton kind of fitting the pieces together like it did last year. It's going to look different. Like there's not going to be 5-guard lineups on the floor. Certainly not as consistently as last year. They might have a traditional 5-man. They'll be long and athletic on the wings, and obviously have a playmaking point guard. I feel like they're in store for another good year.
Yeah, it seems like with all the pieces that you just mentioned right there, John, it might, you said like the profile might appear different if you're going to watch from the sidelines or watch on TV. But I think the overall win total and overall success could mimic this past year. And if it does that, then you guys are in the exact same place. So I think Creighton fans out there should be, applauding a little bit to that assessment. I think they'd approve of where your head's at with next year's team. All right, John, let's get you out of here on 3 fun ones, okay? We'll ask you 3 tea questions. We'll ask you some tastes, a player you trust, and some tunes. Tastes, help us out. Is there a great craft beer or a brewery that we need to know somewhere near Omaha, Nebraska?
So I'm a big fan of Zipline. I think that they got a couple IPAs that that I really enjoy. And they had a tap room down. I used to live downtown, so they had a tap room downtown that I would visit a lot. And it's actually really close to Creighton's campus. So I'd imagine that after Creighton basketball games, I'm sure a lot of Bluejay fans have popped on over in there and grabbed a few breweries. So Zipline would be my recommendation. That's good beer.
Excellent. All right, so if you're in the neighborhood, that's the one to look for, right?
There's a lot of good craft beer spots in Omaha for sure, but that's my go-to. I guess it's maybe it might be technically a Lincoln beer, but
if I get my eyes on some Zipline out here on the East Coast, I'm definitely going to give it a try due to your recommendation.
Yes,
John, trust. Who's the one player in the nation that you would trust this past season with a last-second possession, whether it be to make a shot or make a game-winning play?
Going into the year, I felt Miles Powell is like the no-brainer. That's my guy. I'm gonna rock with him at the end of the games. But I don't know, man. You know who maybe goes under the radar here? Kamar Baldwin. I'm naming Big East guys because I that's the league I watch. Kamar though was sick. He made some ridiculous shots to win games. How about Ayo Dosunmu at Illinois? Didn't he have those like one dribble pull-ups that he would hit like over defenders late in games? He was pretty clutch. Give me one of those three.
That's a good list right there. When we've asked this question to some other guests, John, Miles' name came up a ton, of course. And then we've talked about Kamar Baldwin's greatness in late game situations, of course. But, Ayo, totally underrated in that situation. I like that you brought him up. Well done. And then Tunes, what or who have you been listening to while you're longing for the return of sports and you've been pumping out some content?
Yeah, so Mike, I just stumbled upon this on Spotify, the Last Dance playlist. Have you been watching the documentary?
Yeah, of course.
It's some great jams that they've been like kind of mixing in during Jordan highlights from the 80s and 90s. And so I guess someone on Spotify put together a playlist of all the songs that have been on the documentary so far. So I've been kicking it with that, and it's been good.
Nothing wrong if you can drop a little Tribe, and then they even have some, stereo MCs in there. Brought me back, musically as well.
My gosh. It's been great. It's been great.
All right. Well, John, thank you so much for talking some college hoops with us. We totally enjoyed it. We hope the listeners out there, we're helping them with their sports fix. Please stay safe, stay calm, stay strong out there. Cheers, Salatra, Gatsulatia, and enjoy the next zip line that you get your hands on, okay?
Might have to go grab one now. Now I'm thinking about it. But it's
Cheers, John. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good one.